Good evening, class. We're so glad to have you joining us. And tonight we're going to be continuing with our study of the tribe of Manasseh. And I hope as we go along, you're recognizing why we're doing this study, to show you what a magnificent, huge plan God is working and has been working. So we are on page 1 of Romans number 40 notes, the tribe of Manasseh. And we are picking up tonight at number 6. So the note, and we went quite a bit of background for this last week in notes 1 through 5. So in note 6, we see that the right of leadership, rulership, and law-giving was given to Judah. And that would always reside with the tribe of Judah. The birthright blessings, however, were given to Joseph's sons. Remember, Joseph was Jacob's favorite son. And so they were given to his two sons, Ephraim, Ephraim, and Manasseh, Manasseh. And the reason for that was because Jacob Israel adopted Joseph's sons as his own. He said, they're mine. And he said, if you have other sons, they'll be yours. He says that to Joseph. They'll be yours. But these two are mine. In other words, I've adopted them. And therefore, as a result, in essence, Joseph, the favorite son, would have two tribes, full tribes, in their own right. He's going to have two portions of tribal allotments through his two sons that Jacob, Israel, adopted. And so he would not only have an accepted predominance among his brothers, which, by the way, isn't that what he told them? He kind of jumped the gun. There is a time when I don't tell it all. Just sometimes you should just say, I know this is true, and I need to keep it to myself. It reminds me of the time when God told Samuel to go up and anoint David king. And Saul was already king. And Samuel says to God, he says, but he'll kill me. If they ask me, what am I doing? What am I going to tell him? He said, just tell him you're going up to worship. Because in essence, you are going up to worship. Don't tell it all. And of course, he went and they worshiped, but he also anointed David king. But he would have a twofold portion in the inheritance. So he would not only have the predominance that God told him he would have, because he said what? All of his brethren would bow down to him. And they did, not only in Egypt, but he had the predominance now in the tribal identity. Now, Ephraim and Manasseh received the status of full tribes in their own right. Okay? And you will see this in Genesis 48:5. And now your two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you in the land of Egypt, before I came to you in Egypt, are mine. They are as Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. In other words, the birthright blessing should have gone to Reuben and Simeon. Instead, they went to Ephraim and Manasseh. So Jacob, Israel, then blessed Ephraim and Manasseh. And we saw something. While Manasseh was the firstborn, in Jacob's blessing of the sons of Joseph, he gave predominance to Ephraim. However, what we need to look here is Jacob did declare that Manasseh would also become a people and would be great. Said he also will be great. He also will become a great nation. And I would say Ephraim has become a great nation. As well as Manasseh. But Ephraim, the second born, would kind of come to predominance first and would become nations, plural. And I will tell you that that has occurred. So Ephraim became a great nation that basically birthed nations, and Manasseh became a great nation. And in the end times, and that should be in the end times, there was to be a time when, by the way, Manasseh would be preeminent. And I would simply ask you this question. For those of you who know, have a hint, is that true? Yes, Manasseh has most definitely become predominant and has been predominant for several decades. Actually, several decades. Since a certain event. And that event was what? We'll get to it eventually. The blessings were to occur alongside the fulfilling of a divine purpose. In other words, they're going to get the blessings, but they're going to occur right alongside the fulfilling of God's divine purpose, and that divine purpose is seen in Genesis chapter 18. And I'm going to pick it up at 17 so it flows. And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am doing? Since Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I have known him in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of the Lord to do righteousness and justice, that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has spoken to him. Which is what? Great nation, many children, many children. Okay. Now, after the exile of the 10 tribes, and that began prior to 722, but actually 722 BC was the fall of Samaria, the capital of the northern kingdom. The tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, those separate tribes in their own right, and we know that even when they came into the promised land, we know that a part of Manasseh even went to the other side of the Jordan. But they were often referred to by names that reference Joseph. If you read many of the Old Testament prophetic books, particularly the minor prophets, many times you will hear the northern kingdom referred to as Joseph. Okay, Joseph. Even though Ephraim was certainly the predominant, and many times the entire northern 10 tribes were referred to by Ephraim, but often they were referred to as Joseph. And in the area of Media, the Media Persian Empire, there were Israelite groups called Yasubians and Yasub-Galians. And you can kind of see, and for example, in Hebrew, Joseph appears in pronounced how? Yosef. Okay, and by the way, that would have been the name of Jesus' supposed father too, Yosef. So you can understand that these people in Media, okay, in the area of Media Persia, were Israelite groups. And they were identifying with their forefather, Joseph. And so they were called Yasubians and Yasugalians. And isn't that interesting that in the area where these people groups pop up who are called that was exactly where the Israelite exiles had first been taken by the Assyrians. So when the Assyrians exiled them, the very first place they took them, all of a sudden there are some people groups who start being called Yasubians and Yasugalians from Joseph. So in a way, they were attempting to do what? Retain their heritage and their identity, even though they were in captivity, even though they had been exiled by their land. Now, in the eastern Iranian, Iranian area that is close to the Indus River Valley, and that's why I've said, as you look at your maps, you begin to see, okay, I'm beginning to see some things now. Okay. Were another people, and they were called the Asapioi. And they were also at one time called the Isapoi. And the Asapioi and the Isapoi were also called, guess what? Yasufzi. And do I have to tell you meaning? Joseph. So we found the Yasubians in Media. Now we find the Asapioi, the Isapioi, and the Yusufsi. Say that 20 times. Meaning Joseph. And guess where this area was? It was the region of Hara. H-A-R-A. And I'm going to read to you 1 Chronicles 5:26 and see if you can see why that is significant. 1 Chronicles 5:26. So the God of Israel stirred up the spirit of Pul, king of Assyria, that is Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria. He carried the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. Let me see a name you're familiar with there. Manasseh, into captivity. And Manasseh would have been the son of Joseph. Okay, that tribe coming from. He took them to Hala, Habor, Hara, and the river of Gozan to this day. And to this day meant at the time the Chronicles were being penned. So they were in Hara. Now, do you think it is accidental that the Reuben, Simeon, the half-tribe of Manasseh got taken into exile and they were dumped in Hara, and then you begin to see a people called the Yasufsi after Joseph living in Hara? I don't think so. I think they were trying very hard to hold on to an identity, a family, generational identity. So the name Joseph in the Iranian-Afghan region could be rendered Yo-Asaph. Yo-Asaph. So now you see the Asapioi, the Isapioi, you see that as that morphs in, but it was Yo-Asaph. And ASAP is a derivative in Semitic regions of Joseph. What do I mean by that? Well, once we get further into Manasseh and the clans of Manasseh, the peoples of Manasseh, the tribes of Manasseh, you're going to see the ASAP in many names as they migrate further west. And that's why. It comes from Yo, 7J, Yo Asaph. Because if you put a J in it, you got Yo Asaph. Sounds a whole lot like Joseph, doesn't it? Okay. Now, other Scythian people, and so if you're talking about Scythian people, and that's why I told you kind of hold your maps close to you, because this whole area of Scythia, you have the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea. In this area here, that's Scythia. So other Scythian peoples, now you're going to get some others, such as the Aspasi. And the Aspasi were located east of the Caspian Sea, so they would have been situated on your maps. By the way, if you're at home and don't have maps, all you have to do is call us and give us your address, and we will send you the maps you need. They would have been in this area. And then you have some other people. Aspakari in Sarika. Now, remember I told you, was it between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea? And that area of Sarika is the modern day Siberia. How many have ever heard of Siberia? You kind of have an idea where it is. Again, you're seeing that same ASAP or ASP. And they were also descended from Joseph. And the Aspakari of Sarika give rise to the eastern Sienbi or Suebi. You say, okay, my head's spinning with all of these names. Well, the more we refine them, the more you're going to recognize them. In Western Europe, these people are referred to as the Suev. And why are they significant? Because the Suev Sienbi participated in the Anglo-Saxon invasions of Britain. How many of you have English or British genealogy? Now the ASAP root that is associated with Joseph is also connected with the Scythian Asporgian tribe near the mouth of the Don River in southern Russia. So that, again, that's why I'm saying as you get your maps and you're saying, oh wow, it goes way up. Because here's in this map, and you have this one too. So it all the way up into Russia. Now, according to Talmudic tradition, part of the lost tribes had settled on the banks of this river. That's in their own history, because they're doing history. The Aspergian settlement has been identified with the Asgard home of the ancestral god of the Scandinavians. Now I'm going to stop for a minute. Why do you think that might be? Well, obviously, the Scandinavians at some point had a portion of what tribe? Scandinavians, Dan. And we know that everywhere Dan ever went, he put his stamp everywhere. It was on rivers, it was on communities. He wanted everybody to remember Dan. And so the Don River could also, it's Dien, Daled Nun. And so it's a whole This is the Asgard home of the ancestral god of the Scandinavians, okay? And we know that the very first tribe to go as far as they could outside of the borders of the land of Israel and still be in the borders of Israel was Dan, and the first thing that was done was a golden calf was set up. So idolatry, it would not be all that unusual. And also the Anglo, A-N-G-L-O, Saxons, S-A-X-O-N-S. So the Anglo-Saxons also had this ancestral god. The religious organization of the Aspergians revered a character called Aspergos. You don't really have to think much about that, do you? So the root ASP is derived from the same Semitic root as the name of Joseph. And so as you begin to trace this, you begin to look at it, the logical conclusion is that these people must indeed have been descended from Joseph. And they were keeping, they may not have known a great deal. They had probably lost most of their language that they had once spoken, which would have been Hebrew. They would have lost much of their identity, but there was a little, just a faint trace memory that they had in keeping certain things. So from this area, there were migratory movements to the west. And when they began to move west, and if you will look at your maps, the ones that have the arrows on them, they're all pretty much moving west. Not all, there was some eastward movement, but many were moving obviously west. And peoples from Scythia, okay, so there were people from Scythia, this region between the Black and the Caspian Seas, and they began to move. They began to move, and they moved into Scandinavia. So they began to move into this area, and they also moved into then Germany. From where they moved into, then from Germany they moved into France. And then the Low Countries, and the British Isles. So that was Joseph. Those were the people who basically were descended from Joseph that kept an identity to Joseph. Now I want us to specifically look at the tribe of Manasseh. Julius Caesar, and how many of Julius Caesar wasn't just a character in Shakespeare, he was a historic figure. And he actually wrote a great deal. And in the Gallic Wars, reported the Usipetes and the Tencteri peoples crossing the Rhine River into Gaul, so that'd be coming from Germany into France, to escape the advancing, guess what? Suebi. And the Suebi are what? They're peoples of Joseph. They're descended from Joseph, keeping that. And what's interesting is the Usipetes and the Tencteri and the Suebi, guess what? All three people relate to Joseph. So what are we now seeing? We're seeing descendants of Joseph coming in and basically pushing out people who flee, and they're fleeing their brother. But they don't know that they're brethren. They're all brethren. They're all family. But they don't know it. These people have come in and they're fleeing from them. Now, the Tenteri, by way of Tahan Takan, son of Ephraim, and you'll find that in Numbers 26:36, and Usip, or Usip, also is a form of Joseph. So here it is. You have, again, descendants of Joseph pushing out descendants of Joseph. Don't know who they are. Any questions about note 13? Anglo-Saxon, Scandinavian, and Frankish groups. And of course, Frankish groups were those people groups who formed France. Were all called, guess what? They were all called Germans. They were all called Germans by the historian Tacitus. And Tacitus lived from 56 to 120 AD. And when he wrote about them, he said that these groups said they were descended from Tuisto and his son Manus, who was the father of the Ingivonus and the Istivonus, which remember we kind of hit on briefly before. Now the name, just before we go any further, I want you to look at, he said these groups that came in, this Anglo-Saxon, Scandinavian, and Frankish groups that they called Germans, he said they were descended from Tuisto and his son Manus. And he said the father of the Ingivonus and the Istivonus, which we've already looked at briefly in other tribes. But you see a name there, the name Manus. Anybody have any ideas about where Manus might have been derived from? Manasseh, yes. The name Manus derives from the name Manasseh. And I have a misspelling there, but I'm going to correct it. By the way. Now, the name of Shechem, and I'm going to read it to you in Numbers 26:32. And I want to Numbers 26:32. Of 31 is of Asriel, the family of the Asarielites, of Shechem, the family of the Shechemites, of Shemida, the family of the Shemidites. Now, what I want to say about this is that the name of Shechem, a clan of Gilead of Manasseh, and that's Manasseh, there should be an H after that. You remember sometimes you came up with Gileadites, but they were part of the tribe of Manasseh, was a clan, because they named it after where they settled. Remember, they settled in Gilead. And so the name of Shechem, a clan of Gilead of Manasseh, is found in the Shechem. Okay? And I want to stop here for a minute, because remember what Tacitus, the historian, said? He said these groups were descended from basically the Ingivonus and the Istivonus people. Well, when you understand that Shechem, a clan of Gilead of Manasseh, okay, so a clan of Manasseh, are found in the Shechem, who were part of the Istivonus. sons of Manasseh, and are the only known people from that group. If there wasn't any more people grouped out of the Istavonis, they don't know about, but they do know that the Shechem are. Now, the name, you have the Istavonis, but the name Israivone was sometimes written as Iskavone, and whether it's Istavones, Iskavone, Isravone, they all come from the same root. What do you think that root is? Isaac. It's Yitzhak. Now I go back. I'm going to keep repeating this. What did God tell Abraham? In the name of your son Isaac shall your descendants be called. And think about it. That's exactly what happened in the years 56 to 120 AD. Because Tacitus, the historian, was calling these people by the name of their ancestor Isaac. Now we're going to look at another son of Manasseh, Makir. Makir was the son of Manasseh, Manasseh. And he's become very interesting. Descendants of Makir were referred to in Hebrew as Ha-Makiri, which, for those of you who've taken Hebrew, you can kind of tell me what it is. Anytime you have ha in front of a word, it is the same as a definite article. Remember we were studying the 91st Psalm in Hebrew? And I said, it's just not even there, not just a stone. But in Hebrew, it's ha-eben, the stone. So what they're stumbling, he said the angels. God's going to give his angels so that you don't have to stumble over the stone. Do you realize that's the promise in Psalm 91? You don't have to stumble over the stone. But when Jesus came on the scene, what did they do? They stumbled over the stone, even though they had been given a promise in Psalm 91 that they didn't have to. And there were some who didn't. Is not this the Messiah? We have looked in the scriptures, and this is the Messiah. The stone. So here, what were they calling the people then? The Makiri. In other words, the people group in Hebrew is called the Makiri. Okay, they are the sons of Makir, and they were referred to in Hebrew as the Makiri or Makirites. Now, Makir was the father of Gilead. And I need to stop here for a minute. Remember, there was a place where they settled east of the Jordan that was called Gilead. Okay, so there was a place. Now we're talking about a person. Okay, Makir was the father of Gilead. Gilead was the son of Makir. An ancestor of the portion of Manasseh which settled on the east bank of the Jordan. So you had a person, okay, and then they named the place Gilead as well. So that portion of Manasseh that settled on the east bank of the Jordan River, along with Reuben and Gad. So we know that Reuben and Gad and a half tribe of Manasseh settled on the east of the Jordan River. Now, Makir was the father of the Emergian Siths. And their names, guess what, are recognized by permutations of the name Makir. M-A-C-H-I-R. So you can see, oh God, there's a little bit of Makiri there. Emergian. Or Emergian, depending on pronunciation. And then that morphed into Emergio Scuthi, which is still what? Scythians. So the Emergio Scuthi were first known, guess what? First known. Well, where did you come from? Where were you before? And guess what? Where they were. East of the Caspian Sea. So what do we know about this area east of the Caspian Sea? That's where they were exiled. Remember what I said? They were first known. They said, oh, we don't know, but this ancestor and that ancestor, they first we know about our oldest ancestor was east of the Caspian Sea. It just happened, right? They just happened to pop up, and that's where their ancestors were. No, that's where they were exiled. That's where the tribe was exiled. And guess what? That area was associated with the tribe of Manasseh. So they were connected with and neighbors to the Massageti. Now this is kind of an interesting, remember what I said, once you start tracing, we start tracing the tribes, you're going to find out that the tribes intermingled. They intermarried. And then you had new people groups that were sometimes a blending of two or more tribes. Well, the Massageti, whose name is a combination, obviously, of Manasseh and Gad. And I know we haven't done the tribe of Gad yet. And believe me, when we get to the tribe of Gad, they're really interesting, and they have some really interesting names and clans. So their area of settlement include names such as Margiana, Marikai, and Maruka. Okay. But getting some of the ma sound there. Now, we were looking at some of the stands on the map before we started class tonight. For you at home, sometimes we have a little class before the class in conversation. And we were talking about the stand countries. And some of you are looking at me like with eyes, deer in the headlight eyes. Well, if we look at note 16, the city of Maruk in Sogdiana, and by the way, someone asked me and said, I can't remember all these names. You don't have to. What I want you to see is to back up and see the big picture of what's happening. God's plan in moving his people all over the world. But Sogdiana is in the modern day region of the stands. Turkmenistan, and that should be Turkmenistan, not Turkmenistan. I'm going to spell it for you. Turkmenistan. Turkmenistan. Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. Now here's what's interesting about that. The city of Maruk and Sogdiana, which is in that area where you have all those countries today, modern countries today, was later named Samarkand, or Camp of Samar. Now I want you to think back. I want you to think about where those 10 tribes originally were. When the tribes split, and they named their capital Samaria. Now, it would have been pronounced in the Hebrew of the northern kingdom, Samaria. So now they're out here all the way up into these staying countries. And so they named it Samarkand, or Camp of Samar, in remembrance of Samaria, Samaria, the former capital, Capital, of the northern kingdom of Israel, that just happened to be located in the territory of Manasseh. And let me ask you, did that just happen? No. You know, some people, well, they just happened to pop up in that area and they decided to name that Samarkand. No. So a host of ancient names for places in Scythia, many of them, by the way, had remembrances of Samaria or Samaria. And these places that were named with that remembrance of Samaria were mostly in areas, guess what, that were associated with the Amerindian or Emergian Scyths. So where they settled, there was something, do you understand, there was something in their memory that those things still happen and they still name those places. And the names are based on the root Samar and traced to the North Israelite Phoenician type pronunciation of Samaria, which is Samaria. And why? They were highly influenced by the Phoenicians. And so these people were linked with the Khazars, and the Khazars always claimed to be descended from the clans of Manasseh and Simeon. And let me ask you a question. Could that be possible?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Why? Because these tribes always seem to hang around together. Now, we're going to go back a little bit in time. There were a group of Emergian or Emergian Scythians in the time, and that's not Darius, it's Darius. That's my fault. I don't know how that got typed, but I have no one else to blame but me. I'm the one who typed it. So, but it should be Darius, Darius, king of Persia, Persia. And Darius was king of Persia from 522 to 486 BC. And these Emergian Scythians were reported as then, at that time, in other words, at that time frame, 522 to 486 BC, were reported as then dwelling on the banks of the Tigris River. And we know that the Tigris River has been located, obviously, in the territory of Babylon or the territory of modern-day what country? Iraq. And here, these people were called, golly, Saka Humuvashka. Okay, in Persian. That's Persian, not Persian. It's Persian. Persian. Yeah. Like I said, try to say some of these names 30 times, even 10 or 5. And now this is a little bit easier. Gameri, Umarga in Babylonian. So they're the same people, they're just called something different in Persian than they are called in Babylonian. And Gameri means either tribes or Cimmerians, or both, since the Scyths and Cimmerians were originally one entity. Remember when it's been a while, but we first began looking at the migrations, very first time we looked at them migrating after, obviously, the Medo-Persian Empire took over the Babylonian Empire, and they let them migrate. And so they were one group, and so they then morphed, they divided and went their, little separate ways. They were dwelling in the same direction. It's like leading an Israel trip group, and we're all heading in the same general direction. And there are some people that they're heading in the same general direction, but they aren't heading in the exact same direction. They're going off, particularly if there's shopping to be done. Well, that's what these people did. They headed in the same general direction, but then they would branch off a little bit, even though at one time they were one group. I guess rather than say that, I should talk about when we would take the daycare children out. And then we learned something. You needed to have them all hold on to a rope. Don't let go of the rope, because if you let them, they're heading in the same general direction. Because often we would go and take them over to the Waterworks Park and play games. And you would think, well, that's just from here to there. I know, but children can get sidetracked quite easily. A flower will attract them, or if they see an animal. And so we said, don't let go of the rope. And I'll tell you, that was not a straight rope. A lot of times that rope kind of went like this. So the Urmarugi of Saxon Germany were more than likely a branch of the Mercian Saxons, who in England had another name. Okay? So you had the Urmarugi of Saxon Germany, who really were a branch of the Mercian Saxons in England, were also known as Scotty Marika. Now you're seeing something again, right? Scotty Marika from Scythians, from Maruka, which was another name for Samarkand, named after Samaria in the land of Israel. So what am I saying? I don't mean to get you confused, other than to tell you, what are you seeing? You're seeing people groups, as they migrate, beginning to do this. But names will still pop up.
What were the two answers before Samaria? I kind of blanked out for a minute.
Okay, in 17? In 17?
Yes.
Okay.
After
Yeah, let's go. Yeah, because that one sentence we just finished could take us. So let me go all the way back. Darius was king of Persia, and he found these Mergian Scythians dwelling on the banks of the Tigris, Tigris river. And then the Humavashka and the Gameri Umurga were the same group. And Gameri means tribes or Cimmerians, or both, since the Scyths and Cimmerians were originally one entity. Now, one entity. They were one people group. The Urmarugi of Saxon Germany were more than likely a branch of the Mercian Saxons, who in England, were also known as Scotty Marika. Now we're seeing, okay, here comes another tribe. Okay? From Scythians, from Maruka, and we know that Maruka was another name for Samarkand, which was named after Samaria in the land of Israel. Now I'm probably going to really confuse you now. Because in Hebrew, now we're reading the Bible and it'll talk about Samaria. It says to the prophet, speak unto Samaria. Okay? Speaking of the capital of the northern kingdom. But in Hebrew, Samaria or Samaria is Shomron. S-H-O-M-R-O-N. S-H-O-M, Shomron, R-O-N. It's actually Shomron in Hebrew. But the form, Samaria, is that of the Israel. Now, here's what's interesting. In Hebrew, so if you were living in the southern kingdom of Judah, and you were referring to the capital of the northern kingdom, you would call it Shomron, because that's Hebrew. But once the kingdom split into north and south, yeah, there was obviously still Hebrew there in the north, but they began to be very influenced by the Phoenicians. And so the form Samari is that of the Israelites in the northern kingdom of Israel and of the Phoenicians. So you will begin to see, because first of all, they went into idolatry. They were heavy into idolatry in the northern kingdom. And so they became very comfortable with their neighbors who were idolaters. So they were highly influenced by the Phoenicians. That's why they were highly influenced by the Phoenician language. They were highly influenced by the Phoenicians in their shipbuilding and their sailing. But that form then, the form of Samaria then is that of the Israelites in the northern kingdom of Israel, because they were influenced by the Phoenicians. Okay, any questions? Okay, we might be able to get a little bit on Gilead. Any questions now up through 17? Now Gilead, now we got Makiri, right? We got all the good stuff about Makiri, Marika, all of those. Now Gilead was the son of Makiri. He was the son of Makiri. And so the son of Makiri was Gilead. Now, you and I, it's a little late to come in, but whatever. We pronounce it Gilead. But sometimes this name in Hebrew was pronounced Gilead. Gilead or Gilead in Hebrew. So from this son, we'll call him Gilead, descended the Galadan of northern Wales. And the Galadi of Gaul. And the Caledonians of Scotland. And what I want you to see, although there will be certain countries in which most of a tribe will end up, there are going to be some who go into other countries before migrating to where they will finally end up, their descendants will finally end up. And some, there will always be pockets, small pockets, who might remain in other countries. Okay. So now we know that Gilead, who was a son of Makiri, son of Manasseh, ended up in Wales and Scotland, as well as some in France and Gaul. Now, Numbers 26:30 tells us, and by the way, basically all it says is it just gives the names, and I'm going to give them to you here. But you can look that up to make sure I've given you the right names. The sons of Gilead were Jezer, Helek or Chelek, Azriel, Shechem, Shemida, and Heifer. Now, some of these names are going to get better. Can you imagine naming your sons Heifer? And that's how it's pronounced. It is believed that Helek was found among the Helvecones. Helvecones. Okay. And they became part of the Vandal, V-A-N-D-A-L, Lugi. and it was a federation. Now, you say, why are you giving us these? You can take these and use them to start your fireplace at some point, if you want to. Or you may hold on to these, and as you begin to look and do some research on your own about these people groups, obviously, we're not going to go looking at all of these clans. But I've given you something that you then can take on your own. And maybe you only be interested in, hey, I've got some DNA from such and such a country. And I want to kind of look now at the clans that ended up in some of those areas. That's why we're doing this, so you can recognize a lot of different people groups are representative of the tribes of Israel. So, and the Vandals were one of them. Now the Vandals were involved in the Anglo-Saxon invasions of Britain. So here what's popping up again. There are some of these descendants of the tribes of Israel who are going to end up invading Britain. And we all kind of relate to Britain, right? We know. As were the Calucones, who were also descendants of Helic. Okay? Any questions about Helic and his descendants? Gilead's son, Azrael, gave his name to the Asari people. Now, the Asari people are located in the mountains east of the Caspian Sea. So they're located in this area east of the Caspian Sea. And it was from this area, so that's primarily where his descendants originally started. And then from this area that the Saxons, Saxons, which we know ended up in Britain, the Frisians, okay, and the Brunswickian Angles, Angles, we know that many of the people from whom many of you sitting in front of me were Anglo-Saxons. Angles were descended from Angles and Saxons. Now, the Frisians descend from Makir's son Peresh. And basically all those give you, it'll give you Makir. If you look up 1 Chronicles 7, 15, and 16, it will give you the listing of the fact that Makir's son is Peresh. And the Frisians were major participants in the Anglo-Saxon invasions. Now, why I'm kind of belaboring this part is one of the big things that was a part of the Holocaust was to try to find the pure, I even hate the term, pure race, right? And so, and wait till we get to Gad. Wait till we get to Gad. It's almost like it's going to be almost, you'll say, oh my goodness. Okay? Because you're going to find out that some of the tribes of Israel were blonde-haired and blue-eyed. And when you understand the whole background of World War II and the Holocaust and all that nonsense, let me tell you something, it was nonsense. Horrific. It ended up in horror. But it was abject stupidity. Because they didn't know. So understand something. You need to understand, here they come in and they invade. And I'm going to stop there because I don't want to talk about the Hauki people yet. You might be Hauki people, or you might be Franza Masani. Oh, wait till you get into the, now. called Amerigo Vespucci.
Sounds familiar. Oh, never mind. I'm not saying. I'm not.
We haven't got there yet.
That's cool.
How many have ever heard, how many sitting in front of me have ever heard of a place called America? I got 1, 2, 3. Actually, I did get every. If you're at home, I did get everybody. It's going to be very interesting. I will simply say, Makiri of the tribe of Manasseh. It just might. I'm not telling you where to go, but it just might fit together. If you're watching at home, please let me know if these classes are a blessing to you. If you have a question, a comment, I would love to hear your comments. I would love to hear your questions. And if you have a question, I will answer it when we start class so that your question will be answered. And I'm sure that many people have the same questions. So if you have a question, you can call it in, you can write it in, and we will address it. If you would like to give in response to the teaching that you are receiving, if you're in class in person, there's a Joash chest in the back of the room. If you're watching from a distance, you can mail it in or you can drop it in the drop box. That's what helps us continue to run the materials off. If you need maps, if you did not get your maps and you need maps and you're wanting to follow along as we begin to trace where the tribes went, where they ended up, please feel free to call in and request those and we'll get those out. Don't forget though, if you call in and want them, that you give us an address to mail them to. We do believe in the gift of knowledge, but it doesn't flow 24/7. So if you don't give us an address, we don't know where to mail them. I say that because there have been a few people that say, send me the, and they hang up and without giving an address. Or they give a name, and it's a name like Jane Smith, which there are probably 5,000 Jane Smiths in America. So if you would give us your name and address, we'll be happy to mail those to you. If you have a prayer request, we would love to pray with you. And we are believing God that we know that some of you are watching are going through some very, very deep waters. I know someone has a daughter going through chemo and having difficulty. Someone else is just having a problem. Her husband's health is deteriorating. We're believing God for a miracle. I believe God is still a miracle worker. Amen. And so we want to pray for you. We're praying for you. If you have a prayer request, please let us know. And have a beautiful rest of the week as you rest in the presence of the Lord, because He's right there living in you.